we are going to view ourselves, if we're looking at ourselves in the mirror, because ultimately that's what's happening. It's our perception of ourselves to the rest of the world that either makes us feel good or it makes us feel bad. And it's always our choice. And so it's important, however, within the constraints of the reality that we live in, right? I mean, let's face it, we are victims of all these norms, rules, regulations, obligations, perceptions from other people that we're kind of a victim of it. And to the point that is okay. Because sometimes just by changing something easily enough, then we can actually get the perception or the feeling or the sense of confidence, self-esteem, beauty that we really want. So I'm very excited to be talking to an incredible dermatologist. She's got the most amazing website name. I'm going to let her reveal the magic of that website. Because it is about how is it that we can very simply change some body dynamics, like our hair, like our skin, so that we can actually find ourselves to be in tune with what we think is beautiful, and then that solves the problem. And you know what? In my book, there's no problem with that, as long as we can get you there. And Apple is just the master at this, and very delighted to be talking to you today, because you're on this mission to transform suffering, at least in the part that you are focused on. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So share with us a little bit about the challenge that so many of us have in regards to that self-perception that isn't in alignment with what we think it should be.
I mean, I think that's all, when I see a lot of people with a wide variety of ages and levels of skin health and levels of overall health. And certainly beauty really starts on the inside, whether it's from how well we physically take care of our body to how well we take care of our heart and soul. That shows up in the skin, it shows up in the way we move, it shows up in how we interact with people, that energy that we bring to the world. And I see people primarily in a state where things aren't going well for them. Their skin isn't functioning the way that they want. It's not allowing them to interact with the world the way they want, whether it's because of symptoms like itching or burning that can interfere with daily activities, or it's things like psoriasis that show up on the skin that other people see. And in particular, one of the areas over the course of my career, which is getting close to 20 years now, one of the areas where I've seen the most consistent suffering. And I really want to point out that suffering is sort of how we perceive things to be. And that's in hair loss. And certainly I deal with a lot of like life-threatening conditions, melanoma, for example, and I see people with other skin cancers, metastatic squamous cell cancer, or they have metabolic syndrome and really bad diabetes, and it's causing either ulcers that won't heal or other skin conditions. And really, I've got a little helper here.
Oh, hey, hello.
One of my little daughter. Why don't you go and watch the show with the other kids? And so that's.
So what does she want to say? What does she say?
Themselves, and that comes up with the suffering. And hair loss is one area where I see uniform suffering, even with something like melanoma or metastatic skin cancer. Some people just are really devastated and they feel like their life is over, and some people feel like, hey, let's get to work. Hey doc, what can I do to fix this? And with hair loss, it's almost uniformly, by the time they get to see me, they've been suffering a long time, and it impacts their quality of life. Really, hair, especially for women, defines how we see ourselves in the world. And a lot of times we get to a place where there's not a lot we can do, especially if someone has been waiting a long time and they have a scarring type of hair loss. You can't bring hair back from that. Once the scalp is scarred, there's not a whole lot that can be done. And if we can catch it early enough, then certainly there are things we can do to minimize that.
So who's your helper behind you?
This is my youngest daughter. This is Pippin. She's 6.
So let's ask the expert, because you've done something quite remarkable, and I really applaud you for that. Because you put yourself in a place where people are going to react to how you look, So
Yeah.
let's ask your helper here and what her thoughts were about when you changed your hairstyle.
Yeah, let me just comment that when I saw this area of suffering, I thought my mission is to really transform suffering.
Right.
That hair loss is one area where we can do it through education and guidance. And so I kind of created a project where I shaved my head for 4.5 months. And actually, this one right here was the first person to see me after my head was shaved, besides the hairdresser and the photographer. She came running home from the neighbor's house, and I knocked on the door, and I answered the door, and she looked at me and she said, "Mom, that looks cool." And then she ran back.
Awesome.
She also said to me, she took my Costco card that had me with really long hair, and she looked at it and she looked at me without any hair at all and looked at it and she said, "You look better without hair, Mom." So, yeah. So, do you want to comment on it?
Are you can?
No, we're not going to do this, honey.
So either you're going to join us or you're going to let your mom talk.
Yeah, you can either join
Which
us.
one is it going to be?
Polite and respectful, or you're going to let me talk, girls, because we had an agreement about this. Okay.
You got to
So,
love the kids. You know, the cool thing when I'm learning about everything, all the things that I'm doing, is, you know, how do we show up in those moments that are so unexpected?
Yeah, that was an interesting thing, because when I first started seeing patients without hair, I remember very specifically one visit with the patient, a new patient, who is actually suffering so much that he showed up in our office and said, "I'm not leaving until I'm seen. I don't care if I have to wait all day." He was really, really itchy. And I had gotten to work early, and I said, "Okay, I'll see him. We'll get him in right away before my clinic starts." And he was about a little younger than me, and I walked in, and I could tell he was interacting with my lack of hair. And I remember pausing and thinking, I can either choose to engage in this or not. And I made the choice not to engage in it. And I made the choice not to address it, not to explain what I was doing, and not to explain my lack of hair. And I made the choice to just kind of show up with my open heart, which is the way I show up with all my patients, and in a professional way. And within like 30 seconds, it was all gone. All of his attention on my scalp, and I could tell his mental sort of thinking about what was going on. A lot of people assumed I had cancer. And so that was a huge thing.
Oh, you got another helper behind you.
I've got another helper. This is my other daughter, Saffron.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that was definitely a defining moment when I was like, how am I going to handle myself in this way and stay in my professional, open-hearted, engaged way? And when I was able to do that, it wasn't an issue at all. And certainly I had days where I was exhausted and I wasn't at my 100% best. And that energy did sort of kind of seep into the way I interacted with people. So that was just
so my question for you then is this, that when you did shave off your hair, what was going through your mind as far as what were you imagining other people were thinking? I mean, I'm sure that must have happened.
Yeah, I had no idea. And I think I'm so passionate about this project. I've created some educational content about keeping your hair healthy and how to navigate certain types of hair loss. And even this second phase where I'm wearing a wig tonight. And I've created some content with a woman in the hairpiece industry to educate people about hairpieces and wigs. So we have, over the next 6 to 8 months, we have planned kind of projects as part of that. And I think I just didn't think much about what other people were going to say or do. I'd already heard a lot of opinions. And once I got going, I think when people understood what I was doing, they were really impressed by it and excited by it. And it just kind of fell away. All of my, my kind of interacting with other people when I just sort of led with myself. And that was actually a big learning for me, presenting myself and not, having a bad day and being able to hide behind a huge amount of hair, or having a blemish on my forehead and not being able to hide it. I remember going to a Tony Robbins event, Date with Destiny. It's a week-long event, and I extended the shaving my head part because I didn't get the educational content built that I intended to build, and I got a blemish like right in the middle of my forehead the day I left. And I remember thinking, like, I can't hide. This is something I can't hide. And I think it was one of those, I guess, what people call synchrodestiny moments. Like, I showed up with a pimple in the middle of my forehead because as a reminder to myself, like, you can't hide.
So what is it? Was it a pimple or was it a bruise? I mean, what was the story?
It was a pimple. Yeah, okay. It was a little pimple.
Right. So it's really quite fascinating to appreciate, what is it that happens within, our brain, if you will, when we're in front of other people and we're just imagining, what it is that they're thinking about us.
Yeah.
And, we are creatures of meaning. And it makes sense. I mean, I think that's perhaps one of the reasons why, we've evolved so much.
Yeah.
As the Homo sapien, as the human with wisdom, or the knowing, a human. And so it helps us survive in this world because people are in fact very judgmental, and
Yeah.
depending on how you navigate people's judgment, you may get in a relationship, whether it's an intimate relationship or a business relationship or a certain sale, whatever that is. And so the way that we look, and the way that we then think that we're being perceived by others is such a huge thing. And you were talking with me earlier on about, privilege and taking things for granted, which is another topic we'll talk about later on. But the truth is that, we really oftentimes haven't stopped to think, okay, what's real about me right now? And what's the impact that has on others? And am I okay to be with that? And I think these are some questions that most people just don't really think about or sit with or meditate about. They just make the assumption, well, I have a pimple and now I'm going to be judged. And people are going to think, oh, all these awful things about me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the truth is, in my opinion, and honestly, I mean, I can, take responsibility for being guilty of that too. But when you see with somebody with psoriasis, right, which can be very intense, and for those who are not familiar with psoriasis, it's a skin, reaction where there's pimples and redness, and I'm sure you'll say it much better than I will. But I mean, the point is that people look at it and think, oh my gosh, is this person infectious? Can I be contaminated with something? Again, it comes down to our own personal ignorance. And, you watch these movies, I think it was like Papillon and leprosy, and yes, that was certainly very contagious. And I think that's, ingrained in the depths of our brain to think, oh, I got to protect myself because I might get a certain disease. And so my question for you then is, how is it that, are you able to help your clients in one way or another to kind of what I call flip the switch, kind of turn that switch off and say, hey, you know what, this is who I am. And I'm okay with that, just like you were okay with, not having hair.
Yeah, well, and I think my situation was a little different because it was a choice I made. And every time someone asked me about it, I got to tell them about this project that I was really passionate about. And that's something that I was definitely really clear about and continue to be clear about, that for many of my patients, hair loss is not a choice. Psoriasis is not a choice. And, and a lot of the assumptions people make about being, like a really butch woman who's like trying to buck the system of beauty, that's not who I am, and my patients aren't that. So people that right now, my hair is pretty much a buzz cut. And, and I think that's something to be sensitive to. And I do think it comes from self-acceptance. And when people who have a skin condition come into a situation feeling less than, feeling, with already the expectation that they're going to be judged about it, that actually draws that kind of energy, draws more of that energy towards them. And so I think that's where the, transforming suffering comes from, kind of accepting like who we are. If we just decide that we are this vehicle, really this body is a vehicle to carry us through our spiritual experience of life, then we will be limited by it. But if we can understand that we have challenges that are brought on, and that they're really calling to transform from kind of the inside, that's an option, and that can change everything. It can change it definitely will change the way people interact with you. And when you come into a situation with like labeling yourself, that sets other people up to label you too, and that was something I definitely felt like with that blemish in the middle of my forehead. I was going to be meeting these thousands of new people, and already I don't have hair. And already they're going to be making assumptions about my overall level of health based on the fact that I have no hair. Usually it's that I have cancer, breast cancer in particular. But
Right.
but that blemish kind of was like, I was prepared to be in there without hair, and then all of a sudden, okay, here's something else.
But here's a thought that I have. And then when you look at these super athletes, called swimmers, for example, I think most of them actually shave their hair off too because they're just faster that way. But it's interesting. What?
The men do.
The men do, yeah. So, but my point is this, is that, you talk about choice, and you're absolutely right. And I know you understand what suffering is. I mean, pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice. And again, it's about perceptions and beliefs and values and all these things, these learnings that you've gotten over the years. But here's one thing that I would, position very clear to anyone out there, is that, when we look around us, and taking these super athletes once again, the ones that do it naturally, not pumped up with steroids or everything else, but have smart lifestyles. And you could see, I mean, they embody, health and beauty and greatness and magnificence because their choice was to do really well with their physique and their minds. And so I think that what happens sometimes is that when we see someone like that, we realize, well, hang on a second, I'm not making those choices. I don't look like that. And so then we make that comparison with somebody else that's super healthy and we're not, then I think we become very judgmental of ourselves. And that's when it really spirals downward, when we have other, blemishes that show up. Because this is what I would say, when we take care of ourselves well, and we're healthy, we're good weight, and we're not overweight, and we make other smart choices, like not using drugs and really not drinking alcohol and getting enough sleep and meditating and all these good things, that a blemish then becomes pretty much insignificant. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think too, it's recognizing the gifts that we have. I love the saying that we can't be anything we want to be, but we can be everything we are. And I've heard that from Shetty, who's a really inspirational person. And I think that's so true. We're not all going to be supermodels. We're not all going to be Olympic athletes. We're not all going to have, we do have a genetic limitation. That is true, that, not all of us can be elite distance runners or.
No, I'm not saying that, but I mean, the point is that we could be a lot healthier. We could be the best version of ourselves. Right.
And so that, and I totally, and that's kind of what I was going to, that we can be everything we are. So taking what we are and recognizing the best parts of us and building on those best parts, our strengths. And a lot of people end up focusing on their weaknesses. They focus on the disease, they focus on the areas that maybe aren't so healthy, but even somebody who, and they don't focus on the ways that they are healthy. Maybe somebody is overweight, but maybe they're sleeping 8 hours a day and they beat themselves up because they're not making great dietary choices instead of really building on, like, I've been really committed to getting my sleep and that's helping me in so many ways, and using that as momentum to carry over to these other areas of their lives where they might not be at where they want to be.
And that again is the purpose of this platform, is really to have that voice and bring into the awareness, some of the things that we all can be doing. If you change one thing in your life and slept what you need, everything changes. Yeah. And that's where it comes down to self-care, where when you really just take care of yourself first, and then everything else can follow nicely. But share with me, the website that you have, Apple Skin Health, and it is about transformation.
It is, and it's appleskinhealth.com. It's kind of my passion side project. I'm obviously really committed. I've got kids, and they're my biggest priority, and then I do see patients, and that's one of my biggest priorities at university. But appleskinhealth.com, my mission with that really is to help people achieve optimal skin health through education and guidance. And I really see my role, I'm not a healthcare provider. I mean, I do provide healthcare for myself and for my family, but really what I provide to my patients is education, guidance, and access to tools that they might not have that they won't have access to without me. Right. But that role as an educator and a guide, I think, is really key to really helping people achieve their optimal state of health. And for me, skin is my area of expertise. And I think it has so much impact on all other areas of our health too. Right now, the highlight of that website is my hair loss project. And I've got some educational material there now, and there'll be more coming in the next couple of months, really focusing on specific types of hair loss, and then also the hair piece options for people who have thinning and loss that we can't really deal with. But that's kind of the focus of it. Really is just awesome. That education guidance piece.
And this is the kind of information that we all need, because again, it's something that we take for granted. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Yeah. But some of the obvious things. I mean, we brush our teeth every day, but maybe we don't take good enough care of our skin. And for all the listeners to be sure, taking supplements that help with the skin is vitally important, but also what you put on your skin, and certainly avoiding products that have toxins that may smell nice and they may have a nice brand, but actually don't do a good job for your skin. What's interesting, and there's some beautiful synchronicity with this conversation, by the way, and that is the fact that I just completed a protocol, study protocol, to help people with alopecia, with hair loss, and stem cells. And so, as you know, I do work in the Bahamas. I've also recently done work in the Ukraine. And the idea is to help people with their own stem cells, not donored, not derived from anywhere else. And bless you. And so the idea is to help people with their ongoing hair loss and stopping that. So I just put that together, interestingly.
Yeah.
And so
I would love to see it.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, I got this.
Yeah, bless you. And so the final thing that I know that you're very passionate about is privilege. And I think it's a beautiful experiment that you've undergone, and to appreciate in so many ways how we are privileged and we don't even know it.
Yeah. I'm sorry about a cold. This tickle just got me. Yeah, one of the most important learnings I had from this project was about privilege, because I had no idea. I had hair down to here. It was thick. It was somewhat wavy, but relatively straight. And I would go to bed with it wet, wake up in the morning, run my fingers through it. I didn't own a brush until I had kids. Oh, this is getting me. Sorry.
Take your time. Take your time. Take some honey or something.
Yeah, and so as I've learned more about hair in general, and that goes with the hair piece industry, the hair, like just weaves and wigs, and the corruption that goes on in that industry. And there really isn't a lot of fair trade hair out there. And how much time and money people spend to have hair that's easy to manage. And especially the African-American population. And what I realized was like, wow, I had this privilege that I didn't even know was there. I didn't pay any attention to my hair. I'd throw it in a ponytail if it was in the way. I'd leave it down when I had, and I used it to hide. I frankly did if I had a breakout or if I had a bad day and I was tired, I would just leave it down and have it cover half my face. And so what I realized is that there's all kinds of ways that people are privileged, whether it's the color of your skin, your gender, the socioeconomic class that you're born into, the level of education of your parents, the mentors you've had in your life. And the issue with it is a lot of times when we have privilege, we don't know it. I had no idea that hair was one of the areas of my life where I was privileged. And if somebody had told me that prior to this experiment, I would have blown it off. I'm like, okay, whatever, And I think there are a lot of groups of people that get labeled as having privilege. That sort of they feel almost like being told that you have a privilege is disempowering. And and certainly as a physician, as a white male professional, I went to medical school with a lot of men and was friends with a lot of them, and they would get really upset when people would say things like "we've got privilege," and I didn't quite understand why, and I think now I really do, because they didn't see it, they didn't understand that they did have a privilege, and their lives were also hard, and they went through a lot of things as well that nobody would see on the outside. And so when you say to someone like, "Oh, you're privileged," it is a way to sort of separate us and to say like, oh, well, this has been easy for you. So it sort of takes away from your achievements in life and your accomplishments. But really what privilege is an area of your life you've been blessed in. And we all have that. Even people who are living really painful lives that some people would look at and say is miserable, there's something in there that could be good, that you might have a privilege. Maybe you don't have a lot of money, but maybe you have a really supportive spouse and kids that adore you. And, you know, you could be really, really wealthy and have all the financial security in the world. And, you know, I've certainly seen it. You probably have too. And the children end up on drugs or overdose and, you know, getting into real trouble. So there's all these areas in our life where if you look for it, but you really have to look for the areas where you're privileged, because you're not going to just naturally see it, because usually they're sort of blind to you because it's a privilege that you don't know about.
It's so unfortunate these days how the word privilege has almost become a swear word. But really, in my opinion, it portrays the fact that, you know, the person who's making that accusation is really not taking responsibility for their own lives.
Yeah.
And you look at, you know, Oprah Winfrey as an example. I mean, at one point, I think she was the richest woman in the world. And if you were to look at her, you know, today, where she came from, you say this person is never going to succeed in life. I mean,
right.
It's a brilliant story about Oprah and being a woman, being black, you know, and coming from the project. But look at her, because she made different choices.
Right.
And so, but I think the bigger context, I think that you're wanting to share, and I think that's very relevant, and that is that, you know, let's take stock of what's great in our life. Let's choose to focus on the greatness. You know, let's choose to focus on what's right versus what's wrong. And quite frankly, the term that I love to use is that when somebody comes up to me and says something, whatever it is, whether it's privilege or something else, and is critical of me, then my response to that is, well, that's their work to do. You know, that's their work to figure out why they need to criticize me so much. And then if I get triggered, you know, if I have a certain kind of response, then that's my work, you know, to do. And I'm finding the more that I do that work, and I think that's what you're relating to, is I find myself so much more at peace with whatever's going around, and it's actually a lot more fun, you know, just to be out there and just to, you know, be benevolent, if you will, and just going with the flow on things. But I love the fact that that's your passion, because coming from your perspective and your experience and the wonderful insights that you have as a doctor and as an associate professor and an integrative dermatologist. And you know, I hate dermatologists, right?
I know you do. You're just jealous of us.
Yeah, this is the story, and hopefully my brother will watch this, because my brother's a dermatologist. He would always beat me up, and
he was the smart brother.
Yeah, actually, he is very smart, but I'm smarter. No, he's actually a professor as well in New Zealand, and quite a remarkable fellow as well. And but the truth is that you know, the words of wisdom and what you provide people is hope. And I think that's what I do, the work that I do, and, you know, give people different solutions that can really resolve something very simple. And you know, doing the deep work is nice and fun, but at the same time, you know, if you could resolve something quickly with the better choices in skin health, then absolutely. And so I really applaud the work that you do, and really love the element that you bring in, the empathy and the compassion that you have going through that experience. And I know it's different than someone else, but still it's very, very intense. And not many people do what you do. And so, you know, you went as close as you could to relate to people who have this condition, and I think that speaks volumes. So how do people find you?
Well, you can find me. I see patients in a clinical setting at the University of Wisconsin, and my website is really an informative place to find some information at this point. In the future, I may be doing some consultations, some you know, with people over Skype or one of the other platforms. I'm not sure how that's all going to play out, but at this point, I do have an email that's linked to that website. And so you could find me there. You can also find me on Facebook and on Instagram at Apple Skin Health. And that's where I've posted a lot of my sort of day-to-day videos about living with hair loss and living with a wig now. And there's quite a lot of information there, probably at this point more on my social media accounts than my website, but that's going to be probably a shifting target, just like life always is.
Well, awesome. Well, I really feel privileged, by the way, to have known you for quite some time, and to be having this conversation with you about a very difficult topic for so many people. And like you said, you know, a lot of women really hide this. I mean, some guys can get away with it, but women typically can't. And so I'm very grateful that you shared your thoughts and your experiences. I was hoping we were going to get this on Facebook Live so we could have some interaction. So we definitely have to do a rain check on that one and figure out, you know, if Crowdcast can take care of their algorithms to connect with Facebook. But once again, thank you so much. And last words are for you.
Yeah, I think the one thing I wanted to say about privilege is when someone brings it to your attention that you have privilege, that's an area to just shine gratitude. Mm-hmm. To really acknowledge that somebody sees an area in your life that has been easeful. And that's an area to sit back instead of think like, oh, I'm not privileged, my life is hard too. Think like, yeah, this is an area. And also to bring that compassion to other people and recognize, like, when you do are coming from a place of privilege, that there are others that are not. And that often there's a whole level of suffering that you really have no idea and no ability to understand. So coming to that with humility and an open heart and trying to understand where other people are having suffering in their life. So
I love it. Thank you so much, Apple, Dr. Bodemer. And I'm Dr. Bart Rademaker, Prescription for Your Transformation, Real People, Real Conversations, Real Success, tapping into your authentic genius. And the thing is that we just need more people like Apple who can show us that path to dive into that authentic genius within us so that, you know, we can live the life that we desire. So thank you so much, and we will be talking some more.
That sounds great.